Welcome to I Found This Great Book. My name is Curtis, and okay, folks, I've got a book that checks so many boxes, okay? So first of all, if you love a mystery, I've got the book for you. Second, if you like alternative history, I've got the book for you. Third, if you like magic, supernatural, I've got the book for you. And if you like a story where you get two stories in one, I've got the book for you. So I've checked off 4 things, everybody. And that's just the first book. We got another one we're going to talk about. So, everybody, I have the distinct honor of speaking with Nicole Glovers, the author of The Conductors and her latest book, The Undertakers. Nicole, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm good and well, and happy to be here.
Great. And before we get started, let me remind you, you can go to ifoundthisgreatbook.com/148 for all of show notes and also to see Nicole's great books. I really love your book, The Conductors. What you've done here is just wonderful. And we're going to dig into it and talk about it. So if someone were to ask, The Conductors, so what's that about? What would you say to them?
My quick pitch is always saying it's a historical mystery set in post-Civil War Philadelphia. The main sleuths, Hetty and Benjy, solve murder mysteries with magic.
Okay. And then there's so much more. I'm telling you, this story is so much and it's so rich from the beginning. So when you first read it, you get into it. Okay. And you see these wanted posters here and they're talking about they're looking for someone. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. They're looking for, okay. That's what they did. They posted how they want, looking for a woman, looking for a man. Caution about a shock collar to subdue magical attack. What? And that stops you. And you're like, wait a minute, that makes me want to read more. And from the first pages on, you're just going to get pulled into this world of magic, mystery, and you see this developing relationship between Hetty and Benjy, which is a wonderful story. So saying all that, what was the spark that made you come about writing this story? What's the story behind the creation of this story?
Yeah, the book started out with several different ideas. One part being an historical aspect of it. I had a time when I started writing, I had an idea for just regular historical fiction about underground railroad conductors, because I always liked that part of history for some reason. It intrigues me. But it's a story, even though I had the idea, wrote down the idea, I never really did much with the story. This was a few paragraphs, and I had an ideas from the characters, basically prototypes of what became Hetty and Benjy. But it wasn't much there. Until one day I was out for a walk, and I was like, what if I add magic to this story? And it was just this random thought, and once I just collided and mixed it up, and it just came together, and the mystery parts of the element, the murder and stuff, kind of just fell neatly into place, and I was pretty much off to the races.
And you make that sound so easy. I'll just add magic to this historical. I'm sure it's a lot more to it. So what, in terms of researching and that time period, what went into that? And what were some of the things that you learned that motivated you in this story?
I did a very in-depth amount of research, basically enough to do my own course in this particular time period. I focused particularly on the time period of 1871 in Philadelphia, but I also looked beyond that, going as far back as the early 1800s until just a little bit after the time period I had selected. And I looked broadly from everything in First, mostly in antebellum South and in the North and parts of Midwest, and got sort of a more better grasp on the Underground Railroad itself, because I think I grew up with a lot of it. I guess I call it the mythicized versions of the Underground Railroad. Because we have there's a lot of myths about it, but there's the real reality is much different. Did a lot of research that I did a bit of Civil War research, not too heavy into it because that wasn't really a focus of the book. I did a lot of Reconstruction era research from what I can find for basic life to even like politics. Even the politics didn't make it really into the book. It was just to kind of inform me and give me a better sense of idea. Because when you see dates on these pages and these books, it's like you think it's a short period of time, but it's really a long period of time. And a lot of things happened, and a lot of interesting things kind of cropped up, and that is kind of put in there. Some things didn't make the book. I ended up cutting for time. And there's certain historical stuff I did highlight. And I also try to find a balance of because I did a lot of mixing with the magic in it. I kind of exaggerated some historical stuff with magic, like the collars that they have. Which did exist, but I added like the element of restraining back magic to add that little the tie into world building. And I think I try to be careful about real life people I put in the book. I think I'm always a little bit wary about putting real life personages in there. So a lot of the characters and cast are inspired by some real life accounts I found by researching, but they're not really a one-to-one comparison to anyone real for the most part. And
Okay.
I think what else? I did a lot of heavy use from library, from books to interlibrary loans, which I really learned how to use. I got access to newspaper archives. Got to dig back into really old newspapers that came out around that time period to give me a sense of like what's going on. And I did a lot of looking for like a firsthand personal accounts. My favorite thing I found was a diary of a free Black woman who was a dressmaker in Philadelphia during the Civil War, Emily Davis. And it was just like, just her writing down of her day-to-day activities about visiting friends, going to events, complaining about the weather, all those things, normal things that happens, even though it's like a remarkable time. And there's even pages at the end of her little diary where she talks about when they found the Civil War ended or when Lincoln was shot. All in this was her thoughts about it, which is like this fascinating to kind of read something that's particularly it's really rare. Given she was a solid middle class, you find a lot more about the aristocrats of the era instead of like more normal people.
Yeah, and I see all that when I read this book. It's not heavy-handed history. It's not like, well, this is 1,200 pages of history here. No, it's not. And the book isn't 1,200 pages, folks. It's okay. It's not a heavy history text, but you use it skillfully to paint the background that you have the story moving in front of. And it gives a realism, and it gives you some grounding, and it lets you suspend belief for all the magic and everything else. So it's really cool. So you mentioned there's a difference between, I guess, the way we've fictionalized the Underground Railroad and historical telling and the reality of what you found. What is that?
Well, like so many little things, everything from the quilts, which I couldn't find any evidence that there were like secret messages in the quilts at all. There's mixed messages about songs being clues. There are at least a couple of songs did indicate to have like some hidden clues, but not in general. Underground Railroad wasn't like organized in the sense that it was like everyone from the north to south. They had conductors, they had all the station masters. It was all really organized, and information came swiftly. It wasn't like that. It was more fractured. There were like segments that were really kind of built up, like mostly like like around like a Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, New York, Philadelphia. That's one big area. There's a big area around Ohio River going up to from that area from Ohio to Canada. Then even there's parts of it went south into Mexico, and even from Florida into the Caribbean islands. it's all fractured and it's more centralized, or I guess localized is actually the word. It's more localized, and it wasn't. That's because it's that time period. They didn't have internet back then. Like the telegram system was barely coming together during this time period. And I mean, there's lots of myths in general about the people who did all these things. Like Harriet Tubman, for example, is turned into a superhero in many retellings, even though she's just a regular person who mostly focused on getting her family back together. So I did a little bit of more research on her, and this a lot of her first trips were like getting her family together and trying to reconnect everybody, and going through the efforts of bringing back her parents and all those different things like that. And I think it's easy to mythifize these things because there isn't an account. There's very few records about certain things. William Still, who was the station master in Philadelphia at the time period, has several notes that he wrote his own books later afterwards that does give you some stories of the other people who had traveled and some other tidbits information, but in general we don't have that sort of information. And laid on top of a very not so great education system that wants to inform about this time period, you get a lot of it's easy to turn certain things into myths and make it seem like it's a few people who are helping out, a few people who are lucky enough to make their way to freedom, instead of like a more complicated story of certain things. And I mean that's why even now you're still finding out about homes that might have been hidden stations for houses. Like every so often I'll see an article saying that this house and so had these false walls or hidden tunnels that were utilized. So there's lots of information we probably will never know about because of just so many other factors.
Wow. And well, two things. One, when you mentioned about communication, and that's another thing I appreciate about the book. You make certain things a reality, So I will not mention the name of this series, but it's a quite popular series, and they always talk about we'll send a crow over, and these crows move faster than the internet. I have never seen crows fly from a frozen area to a sunny area. Yeah. And they didn't get eaten. They didn't just get bored. We'll send a pigeon. And it's like, that's not quite realistic, No. Yeah, goodness. Hey, we still have emails that get lost. So,
Yeah. Right.
But I listening to you, I see that realism that you bring to the story, but at the same time, I think that's so much richer than some of the fantasy that's been created. It makes you realize even more how dangerous and how brave these folks were when they went off and escaped. Because it wasn't like, okay, well, here's your ticket for station number 2 and move on, and boom, 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 and
right.
It's a known thing. It was really an act of bravery to do this because you're in a world that was just hostile. So you bring all of that to the story. So if you're a person who's interested in that time period, this is really a good, fun mystery to read and be in that world. And there are very few mysteries that feature Black characters who are the sleuths that are set during this time period, because we always figure we just couldn't be. But you mentioned bringing in magic, and you have a wonderful magical world, and there's an order to it in the midst of the fact that there is magic, which magic always brings some disorder. Yeah. Could you tell us a little bit about the magic system or how magic works in the Conductors?
In the world of the book, I started off the baseline that everyone can do magic. It's a thing, I guess, a thing that I had when I was reading books. That it was always like magic was always centered on certain groups of people, and I was like, what happens if you have a world where everyone has magic, and what changes and what has to come into effect? And I think that's one of the main things I went into that, because it allowed me to think of different magic systems that people might use, and I kind of based it off of like different, I guess cultural nations, background, all those different things. It's like it's unique to certain people, certain groups of people, because of certain situations. In one case, and that's where kind of the main characters do what I call celestial magic, is that the idea that it was drawn from like different sources, because from lost memories of the people that were enslaved when they came over from Africa, and mixed up with the Native Americans in the area, as well as just them just learning from the other people together to create entirely new different system magic, which I based on the stars, because stars are everywhere. And which is what, and another reason, which is not, is more than just that. It's more of because I was bringing in the importance of like astronomy and astrology, all the stars within the idea of because things like North Star and this going to freedom, all those things, those tidbits in there, and on top of the fact that I just enjoy astronomy in general. So I always like, write things you like about, and I like to let stars, and it just felt like a really good magic system to kind of have, and it gave me rules that I could blend with because they use the constellations to kind of start all their magic, and at the same time I gave it some loose wiggle room that they can use the constellations or do any kind of spell. Like I think the main character Hetty, she uses several different constellations to use similar spells, whereas other people might just have a certain constellation they always associate with certain spell, like they only use this constellation to light fires, and this one was going to for cleaning spells and sort of thing. And it's because I like to view this, at least as celestial magic, as a system that it's very new. It's still throwing out all the rules, because no one really knows rules, because it just kind of came together. Whereas other systems of the magic, which is the main contrast being sorcery, which I kind of gave the roots of like the Western Europe. It's the magic of England and France, all those countries that colonized the world. Basically, it's more rigid. It has these rules. It has spell books. It has wands, and also has rules against anyone that's like not white, basically using them. And so it becomes like a big contrasting magic systems. And I also allude that there's other systems around the world that do have magic systems that's different, slightly different, but I don't spend too much time talking about that, because I really focus on those main two.
And it's interesting how they butt up against each other at times. And the fact that, like you said, everyone could do magic, but since everyone could do magic, people, there's still some people who want to subjugate other people and control their ability to do magic, so control what they can and can't do. And through the use of these shock collars and rules that are imposed so that Black people can't hold a wand or do sorcery. That's like reading.
Yeah, that's another inspiration too. I think I base a lot of the rules I had with magic on literacy for reading, and also I read a book about Black people and guns. Basically, one of the little metatextual like articles before the book properly was allusion. I saw rules about not people not be able to use have guns, basically, and kind of tied that with wands. So that a lot of, I guess, another kind of real life thing I kind of mixed in with the magic. So
yeah, because all of a sudden that equalizes certain things, and that's not the goal.
Right. For some people.
Yeah. If you can do as much damage to me as I could do to you, well, now all of a sudden I have to treat you in a different way. Your two protagonists, your two sleuths, Hetty and Benjy. Well, one thing, you have a story within a story. Yeah, you weave a story of the early life of Hetty and Benjy, and Hetty's journey to find her sister, and all of that weaves through. And in the process of doing that, we come to understand how the world kind of got to where it is.
Mm-hmm.
But they have an interesting relationship. So there was one line you have in there that really fascinated me. At one point, Hetty talked about her relationship with Benjy and said it was a good partnership. It made sense. And she said sometimes a love partnership, I don't have the exact words, but she kind of said sometimes the partnerships based on that love or that passion can be very dangerous or very disastrous. What was the motive behind that?
It's more of, it's her point of view of saying of all the things she had before the story starts. She loses her sister, she loses her parents, she loses a lot of people she loved closely to her. So she's a part of her is being afraid of, she loves someone else, that's going to happen. Even though you find in contrast that, she's very openly about loving her friends and her, like, all the kind of the quasi family that is built up around her, but Benjy's one of the more central point people in their lives. So it's a much different relationship with him versus everyone else, and so it's also basically it's mostly hinting at one of her insecurities or fears that manifests in different ways, and it's also so it's easy for her to say pull back from a relationship with him and kind of defining it in a more rigid way because it keeps her safe from fear of loss.
And that's a good point because for Black people during that time, loss was a everyday occurrence. It could occur at any time. It was never, not just the natural loss we have when people pass away, but the fact that other people could just take someone away from you. And as a matter of fact, one of your characters even mentions that it was when they lost their mate. It wasn't, she said, it wasn't so much that he was gone, but it was just the fact that somebody could just take him away. Not like you lost him through death, which we understand, but the fact that somebody could just take somebody away from you and rip a part of your heart out, that's hard. And you capture that, and that's again, you make that real, which is something I love in the book. You really make that real in terms of how Black people during slavery and even post-slavery, when things still weren't safe for Black people, that guardedness you had to have because things can be taken away from you so quickly. So I mentioned all the different things that are in this book. I also would like to chalk in and add in, you have a love story. You have a love story between these two folks who grow together. So could you describe their relationship?
It's in the class. If you know your romance tropes, it's a marriage of convenience. Basically, they're partners. They see mutual gain. But they're still really good friends in the sense that they're really comfortable with each other, and given that their place in the society within Philadelphia, it's being married gives them certain social benefits in the sense that there's a less chatter and stuff that allows Hetty to more freedom to go with mystery solving anyway without all the wagging tongues in the sense. And also, it's also ties back to the fear of loss that both characters have and stuff. So it's easier to say it's strictly a partnership. It's a marriage convenience to start off with without, going too deeply into emotions. But things happen when you spend enough time with someone long enough. And I think part of the fun for me writing that particular storyline was to kind of explore how certain things changes. And that was actually a big component of the mystery element, the murder of one of their friends impacting and is changing about their whole life basically. Just because it's basically it's someone, their friend dies and just it starts them to rethink everything else they've known so far. And because it's the closest death that's happened to them in a while, basically. It's more because even though they had dealt with murder mysteries and stuff like this, it's very personal. So it gives them a chance to really look into what's around them and see if everything they like it or not. And that's just a really fun. It was for me as a writer. It's a fun little thread to weave throughout the book, and also because it also gives me a break from certain other plots as well.
Mm-hmm. So as sleuths, how would you describe them? If someone were to say, well, how do they work together as sleuths? What would you say?
They are they both are intrigued by the mystery. They have, but there are different aspects of a mystery that appeal to them. For Benjy, it's about the puzzles, about finding the answers. And sometimes he cares about the victims, sometimes it's not. It's a puzzle box for him. Hetty sees it more as, I think it's one of her arcs of the story is seeing it as something to do, to fill her time with, something a little bit different than usual, because she's not really fulfilled in other parts of her life. Because she's still searching for her sister. So the mystery solving something to do with her time, but it's also something fun to do with Benjy and something different. It's also, and for both of them, it's a way for them to use the skills they had as conductors in a tangible manner. Because they basically go, because after the war ends, and they basically come back to Philadelphia to kind of figure out what kind of new life they have. And they're the type of people, they're there because they're used to be on the road all the time, traveling, doing certain things, making big impacts, and now they're just back in Philadelphia, being a dressmaker, being a blacksmith, and like what else can they do basically? So for me, for me, I saw it as a mystery solving. Although even though my research points to people, getting involved in education, being involved in community activism, I thought for these characters, mystery solving is something they got involved in.
Oh yeah.
So,
and they're solving mysteries that the police force could care less about. It's just a dead black person. Who cares? And they're like, no, this is somebody's husband, wife, son, daughter, and they deserve justice. And also, you have this community of people, community of black people there who, how this murder just changes everything. Well, who did this? This hit us. Not just the loss of the person, but could the murderer be one of us? So you still have a kind of small group of people. It's not just some stranger. They weren't just killed by a Klans group or anything like that. This is something different, and it makes everyone. It changes the way a lot of people look at each other. That's a interesting thing. The other thing you bring in is how black people in Philadelphia had built up these societies. It just wasn't all just, we're all poor, we're all black, we're all subjugated. And you introduce some classism in there, What prompted that, and how does that portray itself in the book?
Black Philadelphia has a long history. I think the community's been around since the time of American Revolution. There's been rich people in Philadelphia since that time, and they'd built up a lot from whether they worked as sales makers or caterers and whatnot. There's certain classes that are risen. Like there's a small amount of certain wealthy people, more middle class, and in the much poorer classes. And it was fascinating to me as I did more research into Philadelphia, is how robust the community was. The mutual aid societies, all the community activism of even stuff tying back to the church, and as well as even educational societies. There were several kind of educational, I guess in the sense, but more fancier book clubs that were going on well before the Civil War started. And I mean, some of it is, I guess it shouldn't be too surprising, because if you look to now, we have a lot of civic involvement, a lot of community services within just the community itself, and that there's roots go all the way back. And so it shouldn't be too surprising, but it was fascinating for me to learn, and even particularly learn that Philadelphia, during particularly the antebellum time, and just in the Reconstruction, through the Reconstruction era, was one of the largest Black populations in the U.S. So it's mostly why I ended up by settling into Philadelphia for the setting of the story, because so many things I researched kept bringing me back to Philadelphia. So I just felt like it ended up just feeling like a perfect place to make it the home base for the characters.
So everybody, that's why you need to read this book, because you're going to walk away knowing a lot more. You're going to have a good mystery, some nice fantasy magic, and plus you're going to have a really great world that just builds up. And at the end, you're going to be like, well, what happens next? And so speaking of what happens next, you have another book in this series. And
Yes.
tell us about that book.
This book, The Undertakers, picks up about 2 months after the events of the first book. And it starts with mysterious fires that's been going on around Philadelphia with Hetty and Benjy, and doing an investigation to that. But it also leads them through their other things that happen in the book. They had a case before just in the time between the books that they had investigated, looked into, solved, but it wasn't exactly case closed for them. That they were kind of had some inklings that wasn't exactly right, even though all the pieces seemed to line up. And events and they discover in this book leads them to believe that they were right, that it wasn't a completely closed case, and they find a new death basically opens up that old mystery into launching something else entirely different. And yeah, and from there, and outside of that, it's more tidbits of just the time period itself of the 1871, of just things going on in Philadelphia, and it's more of their personal lives and things going on that are also things I also found for me to have interest in a sense. Because it's one benefit of knowing you have a second book when you're writing the first one is that things you cut in the first book can end up in the second book.
Okay.
So a few things actually even some characters and just some historical tidbits I found interesting that didn't quite make it in the first book end up in this one to kind of fully flourish and flower. So
okay, all right. So now I know you're going to tell me, Curtis. Let's get the second book read first. But is this series going to continue on? Do you think we'll see a third book?
I have lots of ideas for more books. I can't say anything more than that at the moment.
Okay.
But I have lots of ideas for things that it's like, they put seeds in for more books, but it's, I can't say much more than that at this moment.
Okay. Because you build such a rich, wonderful world. And, after reading the first book, and then, you have the new one, The Undertakers. So you're going to read that, and then you're going to be like, well, now we're in the world now. I really kind of want to see what happens with this and that. And so this is a wonderful book for folks to read. I can't say that enough. How have people reacted to the first book? What kind of feedback have you received?
I kind of skimmed a lot of the feedback, but a lot of them saying what you had said. You enjoyed the mixing of all the different genres together, certain aspects of it. It's always interesting to figure here what people what parts that really they connected with, whether it's the historical side of it, whether it's the mystery parts of it, or just the magic side of it. And so I think that's the one benefit being like a mixed up genre book like this. It is all those different things people can say, and then things that surprised me of the people pull out of it.
What's one thing that surprised you?
Just I guess sometimes into different interpretations of the magic system.
Okay.
Yeah, like some people, they view it as like different languages. Someone mentioned they thought it was like a different interpretation of religions. In a sense, because my big tenet was like everyone can do it, but they interpret the magic interpreted different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting, and how that. I think actually I spoke with someone earlier this year that they got tricked by the opening little postings on the little law I put in the very, very early pages. They thought it was real for a half a second, even though then they saw the magic and wands part. It's like, oh, that's not quite. Which I was really pleased about, because I had based those off of I looked into the old the postings that they had for runaways. I looked into like the black codes and like laws and stuff, and try to formulate the language to be really similar. Because I think it's because one of those things I really liked doing for the book was that I wanted to start slowly getting people into this is the world with history and magic all together, and without being like really blatant and telling you from the first pages. So I thought it was like those little opening pages is a good way to do that. So I was
Yeah.
happy to know that I almost tricked somebody, had somebody going.
Yeah, well, again, it's a great way to start off the book. And it just starting early on, like, okay, all right, well, let me get ready now. I'm getting ready for this. This is gonna be fun. So yeah, and also gives you a sense of the thrill, the suspense that you're about to have during this story. Because there's always a risk and danger affecting Hetty and Benjy. There's always something out there, and just the interplay between them and their place, where even when they disagree or go back and forth, you could still see the genuine caring between them, and you know, they just poke at each other sometimes, just kind of like it was two great friends who just, you're sitting there minding your own business, and I have to come by and poke at you. That's my way of letting you know I care about you, and I'm still here. I'll pull your ear and then move on.
Yeah.
So yeah. So we get more of and their profession changes in The Undertakers. Where in the first story, Benjy was a blacksmith and Hetty was a dressmaker, and they incorporated magic in their work. And now they're undertakers. And you mentioned that in the first story of Benjy says, hey, I want to go into that. What prompted, if someone were to walk up to Benjy and say, well, why did you want to become an undertaker as opposed to staying a blacksmith? What would he say?
It's mostly something, for him, it's mostly something different. He likes being busy with different things. And I think he mostly became a blacksmith because it's, one, it's easy way to make money, but two, he gets to tinker with things. And I think one of the things I had in the book was that they do like, I guess, ad hoc funerals, because one of their friends is an embalmer, basically, and they bring them the bodies anyway. So it's part of the community, kind of part of the serving community, in the sense that they've done a few of these ad hoc funerals anyway. So it's like, why not make it a business? I mean, he's also the one more interested in doing this murder stuff anyway. So he just sees it like it's the funerals, it's more the other side of things. Because sometimes it's one you can do, like there's lots of ordinary funerals, but there's also sometimes there's funerals where something mysterious or something suspicious happens to the dead person. It's easier if you're already doing the funeral anyway. So if you have a better head close enough to see what's going on.
Yeah.
But I think and elements of them being interested in undertaking in the funeral business was actually inspired by one of the books I've read through my research. That was basically about the history of like Black funeral home owners and the long history from the early days to pretty much modern. And I thought that was like a really good fit because the book had a lot of interesting stuff about what it means to be a Black funeral owner, and all this, even just being involved with civic stuff even later on, and more, I guess, closer present, even that's outside the range of the book, but more like everything else. It was just interesting. It also just felt like a perfect fit when I read that, and I was like, that's something that just it came natural as I wrote through the book.
And so in the second book, we have two sleuths who are funeral home owners who, you start off seeing the body and moving it to, well, how did this happen? Which is, again, not something you see. So you really are doing some innovative things. If people are tired of the same old mystery, you will not have that happen here. You will get something unique. And also the love that you show the characters and the respect you show the characters is great. And you also portray a different side. We talked about that. The, I guess, middle or upper middle class world of Black people in that time period, which is not usually portrayed. It's a wonderful story to read, and it's a wonderful thing you're doing. So please keep doing it, because we like reading it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I think when there was a period of time where I wasn't sure this book's ever get published, and I was like, I just kept coming back to the stories, back to these characters, even though I tried writing other things and pitched things to other agents and stuff in the time between everything. And just there's just something compelling about this that I really liked doing. And yeah, I don't know. I made like a number of choices to get this book, because I think at one point in my revisions I was like, why did they make this historical fantasy? Why didn't they just make up a different world? Those thoughts you get when you're deep in revisions and wondering about your life choices. And I always kind of went back to like this. All these things interest me, and things I want to get other people interested in, and things I know other people are interested in learning about or seeing, or even just seeing through different lenses. So
yeah, definitely. And I know I'm going to recommend it to a lot of folks, because I know some folks who, especially some people who really like magical works, and I say, well, hey, here's something, but it's so much more. And definitely 2 books worth reading, and 2 books worth sharing with people. And all you have to do is just read the basic premise, and it'll make you, oh, I need to read that, because that's a story I need to read. Yeah. That's one I haven't read before. And the fact that you could come up with this, and the amount of work it must have taken to research everything to get to where you are, is amazing. So you kind of gave us a little bit of insight in terms of the amount of research, but I guess it's safe to say you're not a pantser, you're a plotter. Is that true?
It's kind of a mix in a sense. I start with an idea and stuff, and particularly for these mysteries, I'd lock down like who did it, why, and how. And I think I'll start. I kind of actually, even with all my other drafts, even outside this book, I'll maybe write about, I guess, 30 or 40% with this off the seat of my pants, basically off the cuff, because I have an idea of like the characters and some main parts of the world. But once I get past that 40% mark, I got to outline. Because I think it's helping me to figure out where this is, helping me figure out the way to get to where I'm going to end, basically. And it's simple. It's easier with a mystery, because there are certain points of I need a hit for a mystery. I need to hit these like clues. I need to hit these red herrings. I need to drop these certain things in here and stuff. So it's easier with that. Because I wrote in some, and it used to be in between like these books, I wrote some other things that's not strictly mystery, and I had to like refrigerate my brain about how do I plot these certain points, because I got used to having that mystery being the engine to keep everything together. And yeah, but it's a mixture of things. I guess it's more like I like to know where I'm going in a sense. Because I think it's kind of the way I like when I explore new places. I want to have some place. I like to have the key places where I want to go and have this general sense. But how I get there, I can figure it out along the way.
Okay. We have this wonderful world, and we love Hetty and we love Benjy. So if we could magically go back and follow them around when they didn't have anything going on, there was no case to follow.
Yeah.
What would their day be like if we could just spy on them a little?
Let's see. Oh, I know. At some point, Oh, like if you're doing a little hobby, you know, Benji would probably be reading a book or something, or messing with the piano, or one of those other little hobbies he has. Hetty would split her time in the day visiting her friends for the most part, whether it's bugging her friend at work or just hanging out at their homes, you know, just talking, chattering. There's sometimes she might get roped into like some that cause community service related things that's going on. Though at night she'll definitely be like stargazing. At certain points, I also during daytime she'll probably be out feeding birds. It's one of the little things I bring in the second book. She has a bunch of crows she has adopted in a sense, or adopted her in a sense because they're living on top of their house.
Yeah.
And so she'll be like bird feeding or and whatnot. And artists in general, just kind of hanging out, kind of chilling for the most part, and doing the things that they can't do while they're worrying about mysteries and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times is spending with their friends and enjoying the quiet moments because they're very rare for them.
Super, super excited about The Undertakers, and folks, you need to read both books. So what I would strongly recommend is you go ahead, get The Conductors, and then get The Undertakers. Both books are going to be fantastic reads. You can read them in either order. They stand alone, but you know what? Go ahead and read The Conductors.
It's a better experience. There's light spoilers for the second one, so
yeah.
It's always good to, even though I did divine the beats standalone, but I guess it's still certain threads follow through.
And also, both books are available as audiobooks, and they're fantastic. I also listened to the audiobook version of The Conductor, and fantastic audiobook. And it pulls you in. So if you're into audiobooks, you got that. Or if you would like to just read your books, we got you covered. You can find both of Nicole's books, The Conductors and The Undertakers, at ifoundthisgreatbook.com/148. Nicole, thank you. Thank you so much. This has been so nice to talk with you. I'm a fan. You have written a book I've always wanted to read.
That's nice to hear. That's a good feeling to hear.
And that's a sincere feeling too. And not just because I have it on the podcast. I would say that to anybody about the book, because there's so much in it. It's a book you could read and then reread because you probably missed something. There's a lot of good stuff in there. And you'll enjoy the story the second time as well as you did the first time. Nicole, thank you again. And we're really looking forward to reading your second book. And we'll give you a couple of months and then we'll start bugging you about the third one, okay?
All right. Well, thanks. And thanks for inviting me on. It's been fun.
Well, everyone, until next time, stay safe and have a great reading day.